This is SAGAS.
Hey everyone, what's going on? This is the Serpentine Skipwith, Corbin Skipwith, and I'm here with the special guest today. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi everybody, my name is Tobias Cristiansson. I'm a bass player currently in Necrophobic. I've been playing with a couple of bands before, like Grave, Dismember. I've been playing like a session member for various bands, but right now I have Necrophobic. I'm also with a band called Darkened, which is more like a studio band, but I guess today we're here to talk about Necrophobic, right?
Yes. We're here to talk about the album Nocturnal Silence.
Yeah.
Yes. So, you may as well start with because you're the one that recommended this album for us to cover today. So, tell me, why this album and what does this album mean to you?
Well, this album came out in '93. At that time, maybe I was 15, something along that line. So at that time, when I was 15, it was such a big, I was discovering a lot of new music, and new music for me at the time were only death metal. I was very narrow-minded, so that was what I was going for, and I was listening to whatever album that came out. If you go back to those days, a lot of those albums are considered classics today. And this album came up along with many other releases that was released during that period in '93. So I got it. I think since I didn't have a lot of money, I had to borrow CDs from friends of a brother, like, so I don't remember who I got it from. I do remember that I had the CD at home in my parents' house, and I taped it off, so I had it on cassette tape. So I had a lot of cassettes at that time. That's mainly how I got music, was through friends who knew somebody and stuff like that. So I think I had it already in '93 when it was released. So yeah, that's how I came across Necrophobic. They were also one of the Swedish bands who had also recorded in Sunlight Studios. So you knew that it was quality marked right from the start, really. I mean, back in those days, there were a lot of bands that released albums, but nothing compared like today, when you're like overflooded with music and you don't know what is good. But a lot of stuff that was released back then was, at least I consider, really, quality, good stuff. And this was a record that was one of these records that was really good, and I used to listen to it a lot back in my parents' house. So yeah, that's how I started listening to it, basically.
Nice. Quickly speaking about death metal, wasn't '93 or was it '94? One of those years wasn't that the first? Wasn't that the first release by Cannibal Corpse? Wasn't that '94, '93? I think it was '94.
In '94, I think Cannibal Corpse released this album called The Bleeding, I think.
Oh yeah. No, they came out.
That was the last one with Chris Barnes on vocals.
That's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. So death metal. Yeah, this album, because when I was listening to it, it's interesting because this band, it's described as by a lot of people as blackened death metal, which I find a pretty cool term because it has this very cerebral black metal feel to it, but also has the incredibly thrashing and badass death metal elements to it as well, which is a good mix in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think Necrophobic was one of the first bands that incorporated more melodies to it, at least like more sinister melodies. Like simultaneously down in Gothenburg, you had bands coming out like In Flames, who were releasing a demo. They were the Gothenburg scene. Some of the bands, at least, were going for maybe more Iron Maiden influenced, but I think Necrophobic had more like their influences came from horror movies with melodies that had more of a sinister touch to it. So that already here on the first album had more melodies than a lot of the Stockholm bands who were more. I've had a different approach, but not as much melodies as Necrophobic had. So I think they were really like, a little bit ahead of the time with that style, which later evolved even more, going more into the melodic and maybe influenced more by black metal. Here on the first record, you could very much hear the Stockholm death metal sound, like that's the foundation, and sprinkled off with some more melodies maybe to make it a really interesting mix. But I think this album stands out from the rest of the catalog because it's had the more like Stockholm death metal foundation, so to speak. So, but it came out in that time when things started to change around a little bit. Bands were looking for I don't know if they're looking for ways to progress themselves and going into new territories a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah. Do you think, because, looking at this track list, 9 tracks, 45 minutes, do you think the song run lengths, you have most of the songs are 5 minutes, you have a 6-minute track, Father of Creation. Do you think these songs were the song durations were longer than normal for the time period, or do you think it was common to have longer songs compared to maybe thrash that has shorter, explosive songs?
I think already from the get-go with the death metal bands, they tended to have a little bit more riffs put into the one song, than the normal Slayer tune, which is more compact and direct. Here it's a little bit more have more like progressive elements where you can like put a lot of riffs on top of each other. But I also think that comes from the guys who were doing the music didn't really know how to make a song. So you could like have all sorts of key changes thrown into one song because they were, trying out how do we make songs, and they tend to have a lot of different tempo changes, a lot of key changes, which is, I think, is really cool because it's like in one song can go from fast to slow and then change the tempos a lot, which I think makes it really interesting. And that was also the case with other Swedish bands like Dismember, and to whom had at that time they were trying out how to make songs really. So, which I think it turned out really cool. Later on, some of the bands were like scaling off all the unnecessary facts, just to have it more. For example, Entomb, when they released Wolverine Blues, was quite a big step from what they had done previously, where you had more direct songs, shorter songs. But here in these days, I think it was kind of normal to have longer songs, a lot of riffs, maybe also a way of prove themselves, like, hey man, we could play. Even though I think a lot of the musicians here, they were super young, early 20s, tried to like play on top of the capacity really and see what do.
Yeah. Something I found interesting when I was researching this album, doing my research on it, listening to it, obviously, because I had never listened to this album before you recommended it. But it's interesting because on Spotify, which I listened to it, there's 10 tracks instead of 9, and one of the songs is 1 minute and 11 seconds, Shadow of the Moon. But on the official documentation, there's no 1 minute song.
Exactly. That was actually a misprint when this album was released back in the day. There's a song on the record called Inborn Evil, and that they recorded that song, but it wasn't supposed to be on the album. But when the when the record was released, the record label or whoever did this, they put that song in there. And there's like this intro track called Shadows of the Moon, and that one wasn't there. But the title said Shadows of the Moon, but the song was Inborn Evil, so it was really like a mixed up, you know. So and I don't remember, probably when I had the cassette, I always wrote down the name of the songs on my cassette tape, so I probably had that little mishap as well. But now it's re-released. I have here's the latest re-release vinyl, and here on the back side you have all the tracks, even the ones that were missing from the start. So you have Born Evil here, and on the B side starts off with Shadow of the Moon. But this wasn't like on the original press. They messed up, so it wasn't on there, which is was frustrating for the guys, I guess.
Yeah. So if you can go back, because you said you're 15 years old around that when this album came out. What song stuck out to you the most? What song did you fall in love with the most on this album?
Well, the opening track, Awakening, starts with like a keyboard intro that goes into the guitar riff, and I think that one really set the tone, you know, because it started with this haunting horror movie-like melody, and so probably that one, and also the title track, the Nocturnal Silence. Those two tracks were very like immediate, I guess. I don't remember really. It's many years ago, but I have a memory of that intro from the record, you know, The Awakening. So I still like that track a lot. It's really cool, and we played last September, I think it was. We did like a anniversary show when we played a lot of these tracks from this record, because it was 30 years anniversary for the record. So we played a lot of the tracks from this one, and some of the tracks that haven't been played since back in the day. So it was fun for me to be part of that and doing that show, like a tribute to the past. And you know, I could recollect my memories from my childhood, basically, when I was in my parents' house in my room with my cassette and listened to this music. It was very, like, for me, it was dead serious, you know, when I would listen to this. Yeah. Oh, I know. I'm older now. But
wow. Yeah. 1993. I was born in 1994. So when
wow.
this album came out, I wasn't even born yet.
Wow, that's cool. It's fantastic. You know, can pass back for generations is nice.
Yes. So actually talking about, because you know, obviously this is the first album, you joined in the from this album to you joining the band. Tell us what that was, what that feeling was like for you. What was the process? How did you even get into the band, and how did you feel?
Well, I've known the guys for quite a few years, since we're all in the same scene, and so I know them. I've known them for many years. I also did a gig as a session member in a band called Niflheim, and at that time Sebastian and Johan were also playing in Niflheim. So that's how we first played together. So they knew that I could learn the songs all right and do a good job. So it was in 2018 they needed Necrophobic needed a session guy because the bass player couldn't do 2 shows. So since they already been playing with me in Niflheim, they called me up and asked, "Hey, do you want to do these 2 shows just as a session member?" And yeah, sure, that's fun. So so I learned the set list, did those 2 shows, and that was it. And then a few years later, they were changing the bass player, so they asked me if I wanted to join the band, and I said yeah. So I already knew them from quite a few years back, and so it wasn't a big change for me, really. I just had to learn more songs this time, and I was a permanent member. And because when I did the session gigs, it was just for these 2 gigs. So now I have more of the catalog that I can play already. So, but yeah, it's cool, and those guys are a bit older than me, so it's always nice to hear some old stories from back in the day, how things, happened, and it's nice to hear that every once in a while.
Yeah. To be in a band with your idols, like one of the bands you used to grow up listening to, must be crazy feeling.
Yeah, it's nice. Sometimes when I play on stage, and I play the older songs, it takes me back to when I was young. It still had that feeling inside you, and but it's not like I think much about it. We're on the same level now, but it's always nice to have these memories from the past. And like another thing is, like, I used to go and see Necrophobic playing back in the day, after Nocturnal Silence was released. I saw them live 2 times, I think, in Stockholm. In those days, a lot of the gigs happened at youth centers. It wasn't like it was a small place, arranged by the community or the youth center. Always, like, it always said on the flyers, like, no alcohol allowed. So everybody was drinking outside and hiding the beer in the bush, or something like that. And then you go inside, because inside it was just soda and chips, potato chips. So it was cool, that I saw them back in the day. And yeah. So it was nice. It was all, when I saw them live, it was like, before they went on stage, like, oh my God, there they are. Oh, they guys. And then, now I'm in the band, so it's funny.
Yeah. Did you get to talk to them back then? Like, meet them?
No, I probably didn't dare to do that. No,
Yeah.
no, that didn't even cross my mind that I should approach any one of these big musicians, because I was just one of the teenage guys, in the crowd. I wouldn't dare to do that. Which is funny now, we're friends on, it's funny how it can be.
Did you have you ever told the band that, like, oh, I saw you guys, youth center?
Yeah, because just not too long ago, I moved to a new apartment, and I had to go through a lot of my boxes and stuff. So I found one of the flyers from that actual show that I went to. So I took a photo of it and sent them to them and said, hey, I was here. So I didn't even know that I had that flyer, like a piece of paper with with event on it. So it was cool to find that again.
Yeah, it would have been.
Yeah, I told them I was there.
You know, I'm curious. You said that, yeah, that you would listen to this album. You lived with your parents and your family home. What was were they? Did they have any reaction to you listening to a band called Necrophobic? Were they very strict, like, hey, don't listen to that? Or,
Well, at that time, my parents had already heard me listen to other stuff, you know. But I remember when I first got into death metal, because I was already listening to the hard rock music from the late 80s, but then in the early 90s, I got into a little bit more darker side of things. And so one of the albums that I bought back in the day was the debut album from Dismember. And when you, on the backside, they stand all covered in blood. And I remember when I had that one, my mom was like, now you have gone too far. Okay, and what are they singing about? What does this lyrics mean? Because ah, I well, I behaved pretty good anyway. I managed in school. I wasn't a dropout or anything, so I think they thought, okay, he can do that. And then I remember, like, when I said when I was 13 or 14, like, yeah, I want to grow my hair long, and they were like, no, we don't like that, but okay, you can try at least to do that, and then we'll see. Maybe we'll cut it off. And like, okay, here I am, some 30 years later, still the same. No, but
well,
my parents, they were kind of okay with it. Um, they were questioning me sometimes, like when I started also listening more to black metal bands, like about if they were Satanists or if I was into that. But uh, they were really okay, you know. So
yeah. You know, a memory I will never forget. Because I used to have CDs before streaming. I had CDs. I had my own CD player in my room, TV
yeah,
CD player, and you know, I used to love reading the pamphlets, reading, you know, all that. And I remember I bought the album Slipknot Iowa, their second album. And I couldn't sleep as a kid. I couldn't, as a teenager. I was too afraid of like the dark. I couldn't sleep. So I'll be up all night and I'll put music on to help me relax because music relaxed me. And I fell asleep listening to Iowa.
mm.
And then I got woken up by my mom screaming at me, "What the hell is this?" And then she was mortified.
How can you listen to this music? You know, it's
Yeah.
funny to say that because I used to do the same. I
Mm.
also I used to listen to Emperor when I was going to sleep. I remember
Yeah.
that because they had like more atmospheric stuff going on, and that helped me
Mm.
to remove my thoughts and just calm down. It's funny when you think about it to listen to black metal when you're sleeping, but it worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And the one artist, so even though that happened, the one singer, artist, whatever, that my mom couldn't stand, and to this day she still doesn't like this band. Like I can't bring it. Like she'd be angry if I brought this up. Marilyn Manson. She
yeah.
never liked Marilyn Manson. Hated me
Oh,
listening to him. Um,
yeah. But he was very obnoxious. I remember when he came out, it was, you know, quite a stir in the
yeah,
media. What is this? Is this a guy or what the heck? You know, because he had this weird look, and the music was, and the videos especially were really disturbing,
yeah,
really bizarre stuff, really. Yeah,
yeah,
I understand it's shocking. And I think parents in every generation have to have to go through this, like
yeah.
kids listening to music that they find really disturbing and weird. And I don't know what's disturbing today, if it's reggaeton or I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I just listen to what I like now, and yeah, I don't have any kids, so I can't say how I'll be a parent. But
Yeah.
uh, so 30 years later, after this album dropped, you're now actually in the band. What are some, like in your opinion, has the music industry changed, or the metal industry changed for the better or for the worse, in your opinion, since 30 years ago?
Well, it depends on how you see it. Like back when I was younger, you had really to search for the music. It wasn't just click on the internet. So found if you find a band, could be just a coincidence. If a friend had an album or if you knew somebody, otherwise you didn't hear it. So there was quite a few albums from when I was young that I never listened to because I didn't have any friends that had them, and I somehow never discovered them. Because if I bought a record, it was quite a lot of money, so I couldn't afford buying that many albums. And then also maybe you wanted to buy a T-shirt or you wanted to go to a show, so you had to be very selective about. But on the other hand, when you finally had an album, you really took the time to listen to it, sat down and really listen to it. I think today it's so fast. Maybe you just give an album a few seconds and then, okay, skip to the next song. And I skip to the next. And if it doesn't please you immediately, then you just go ahead to the next record or the next group. And also today there's so much music to look for. It's almost like it's difficult to really know what will be pleasing to you, because there's like a ton of bands. But that's also good because it makes like young bands can put out something and spread it to people, and if they really go for it, they could have somewhat of a career at least. So it's both good and bad. I'm glad that I grew up when I did, because without internet or anything, all these things we have today. So my childhood was out without internet, and you had to, if you wanted to meet your friends, you had to go out on the playground or whatever, meet there physically. You couldn't just stay home texting. And you had to work a little bit harder to hear music. I lived a little bit outside of Stockholm, so it was really like a long, at least for me at the time, it was a long way to go into town to go to a show. It was a bit complicated, but once you were there, it was like, wow, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
Other people just like me, because in my school we weren't many kids listening to metal at all. Just, I don't know, maybe 5 people or something like that. It wasn't a big community.
Yeah, that's actually, the one thing I'm grateful for, because I grew up in the CD era, and I'm grateful because that helps me now, because even now using streaming, I still listen to full albums start to finish. I don't skip, because like I grew up with CDs. And with CDs, you don't skip. You bought it. You paid money for that one CD.
I'm the same. I like to listen to a whole album because I think that's how the artist created the whole package. And even if there's a song that I don't really love, I listen to it anyway. I have to sit through it, and because I don't know, it's part of the whole thing. But I know a lot of people today, they just pick and choose some songs here and there. Maybe they don't even know what the name of the band is or whatever. But no, I'm also like an album person.
Yeah. I remember, so the first ever, so I remember this very, the moment I was a teenager when I switched from classic, because my dad raised me on like Guns N' Roses, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin, to me, Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath are the best bands in history, in my opinion. But that's that. So I was I was 14, 15 when I switched from classic to heavier stuff. And I remember the band I got into, and I still hold very dear to me, Cradle of Filth. I love that band. And we had a CD store that opened up in my suburb, and I was looking for the album Nemesis. That album, no, sorry, Nymphetamine. Nymphetamine was the album. I went in there, and there was a guy with like covered in tattoos, mohawk, real punk rock dude. And I said to him, I'm like, "Oh, do you have the album Cradle of Filth Nymphetamine?" And I remember he looked at me and he said, "You look really young. Are you sure you can handle this?" I said, "Yeah." And he asked me, "What's a heavy band in your opinion?" I said Metallica. He looked so disappointed. He said, "Oh," he said, "I don't know if I should give you this." He said, "Fine, try it," and he sold it to me, and I've loved the band since. But it's just funny, like his reaction when I said a heavy band, Metallica. He like shook his head. He's like, So that's my first experience from switching from classic to heavier metal.
Yeah. Well, the boundaries are always being pushed because back in '86, Metallica was one of the heaviest bands around. But then things changed and other things evolving to more extreme and maybe today Cradle of Filth isn't seen like a really dangerous band. But I remember when the first album came out, Principle of Evil Made Flesh, a friend of mine bought it, and we used to listen a lot to that. And I think that album is like my Cradle album. I still like it.
Yeah.
And I thought they were really cool and but they had something different, something like unique. This mixing in a little bit more like the gothic vibe to everything, which I think is cool. If you can come up with something unique, that a lot of the time it can stand the test of time, really. Like if you have something of a sound of your own.
Yeah. And that album is the only. It's funny because you read online, there's a lot of debates. That album is the only one where he does mainly death growls. It was only on the second album he does high pitch. He doesn't do much high pitch on the first one.
Oh, really? Yeah, I haven't even heard that album that you're mentioning. I kind of, yeah.
I'll send you the lead single when we get off this podcast because it's really good. Like it's very it's important to me because it was my first Cradle of Filth album. But there are a lot heavier ones, and actually this one was produced by Anthrax's Scott Ian.
Oh, really?
So it's very guitar heavy. But, yeah. So that's a cool fact. But yeah, so going back to this, is there anything you can tell me, like any plan, any update or news or upcoming events for Necrophobic that the fans might want to know about?
Yeah. Well, we have a new album coming out. It will be out on the 15th of March. I just got my copy yesterday, actually. I can show you. We rehearsed yesterday. So here it is,
Wow.
the new album. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's cool. I got it yesterday. So we're gonna, do a lot of gigs and tours for this one, starting off not this Friday, but the coming Friday.
Yeah.
Actually, the day after it's released, we're doing a festival in Germany, and then we'll continue like throughout the whole spring, summer, and the rest of the year. We have quite a lot of festival gigs coming up, and for example, in April we're going to Latin America. We're going to play in Mexico, doing a big festival there with Anthrax, Overkill. What else? Amorphis, I think, and a couple of other bands. And then after that, we're going to Colombia, play a show together with Emperor, which is cool. like speaking of my old heroes, I used to listen a lot to Emperor when I was young. Got into them after the first EP they released, so it's cool to do a show with them. And yeah, then we'll continuing doing other festivals around in Europe. Nothing in Australia, unfortunately. I would love to go there with Nick. Yeah. I've been to Australia quite a few times with both Dismember and Grave, so I love that. You know, it's fantastic to play there. I really like the people. The shows I've done there has been really good. So it would be cool to come with Necrophobic to do a tour. It'd be nice.
Yeah. Well, next time you do, make sure you let me know, because I'd like to meet you guys in person, have a drink, have a talk, and that'd be badass.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you for your time. I know, with the scheduling of the different time zones, it wasn't easy, but we made it happen. And yeah, as soon as this is done, I'll do the editing and get this uploaded immediately.
Perfect.
Yeah, you're a very cool host, guest, and I'm very thankful that you came on the podcast.
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice to have a chat. It was really cool.
I agree. Well, I'll definitely be talking to you on messaging eventually. So until then, have a good one, and you'll see this uploaded very soon.
Yeah. Take care, man.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good one.